Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. This is Stuart Cohen from Nodeware and IGI Cyber Labs. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes with Dr. Keri Pearlson from MIT Sloan. Thank you very much for attending today's session. And as I said, we'll get started in just a moment or two while we're waiting for people to log in. Okay, everyone, thank you very much for attending today's session. We're going to go ahead and get started. This is our series with SMB professionals regarding an educational updates on what SMB professionals can do to help their organizations be safer and stronger, a few simple steps that they can take as it relates to helping their organization. We've had sessions about compliance with the folks from NIST and the folks from the Center of Information Security. We've had an insurance session that we had with Aon about how to get ready for insurance. Those are available on YouTube if you want to go back and watch those. We have an upcoming set of sessions regarding MSPs and how MSPs work, some things that SMBs should do to get started around multi-factor authentication and identifying exploitable devices. And today our session is specifically around building a culture of cybersecurity. We are fortunate enough to have Keri Pearlson with us. Keri is the Executive Director of Cybersecurity at the MIT Sloan School. And with that, before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. We'd like to make this interactive. So if you have any specific questions, please put them in the chat box and we will get to those questions either through today's broadcast or we will get back to you with answers after it. For those of you that will ask, yes, this is being recorded. Yes, there will be a video available on YouTube that we will put up in the next couple of days, and we'll follow up with anybody that has any additional questions as well. So with that, Keri, if you just want to flip it to the next slide. And as I said, I covered most of these topics, and we will get to Keri to begin to provide your insights and obviously answer a few questions specifically about the research that you've done.
Okay, well, thank you, Stuart. I'm delighted to be here. Welcome, everyone. If you have a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. And while I'm talking, Stuart will try to pass them over to me during the presentation if there's any questions. I am the Executive Director of a research group at MIT called CAMS, Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, and we look at organizational, strategic, and managerial questions around cybersecurity. There's a lot of places you can go to study questions about the technology, but we're one of the very few academic research groups that looks primarily at the organizational issues. So today, I'm going to talk a little bit about some research we're doing. Just to jump in, though, I don't think I have to tell any of you that cybersecurity is a big concern. I'm sure many of you saw the headlines a couple years ago about Facebook. They were in the news multiple times because of massive vulnerabilities that had been discovered from the black market and the bad guys, if you will. But if you're Words with Friends players, you might remember that 200 million Words with Friends players data was exposed back in October 2019. If you're a Marriott customer, 5.2 million guests were affected back in April of 2020. If you are a Honda or a Jack Daniels fan, you might be interested to know that they were both held ransom through ransomware last few years. And all of us remember last summer when Twitter accounts were hacked, some famous people's accounts were hacked, like Elon Musk and Joe Biden and Bill Gates. And the bad guys posted a note on their Twitter account saying, send me $1,000 in Bitcoin, and I'll send you back $2,000 in Bitcoin. And you'd be surprised how many people fell for that and sent in $1,000 for Bitcoin. When people asked, why would you do this? the bad guys already had an answer to that, and that was, well, look, everybody's struggling from COVID. We know the pandemic has taken a financial toll on so many people, and we just want to be nice. So if you send us $1,000, we'll send you $2,000. And of course, nobody got the $2,000. More recently, we saw in the news earlier this year about SolarWinds, and the SolarWinds breach was particularly insidious because this one really challenged a lot of the paradigms we have about how we keep ourselves secure. In the case of SolarWinds, the bad guys were able to hack into the installation software of their product after it was all certified and ready to go, and therefore it infected thousands of computers. And it was only discovered when one of the customers of SolarWinds happened to notice something strange going on in their system. And that started a whole set of concerns and now a number of challenges for how we think about our supply chain. And also we saw Microsoft, and Microsoft is used by many companies, their software showing some holes and some vulnerabilities. Now you may say, well, those are all big companies and we're small and medium-sized companies, but the truth is small and medium-sized businesses are not immune. And this is a chart I pulled from the Verizon Breach Report. Verizon Breach Report is an annual report that kind of gives us a really good snapshot of what's going on. And you can see in this chart, I'm not going to cover the whole thing, but you can see that small companies had 407 incidences reported in the 2020 Verizon Breach Report. A lot less than the larger companies, but we're not immune. The patterns we saw in small and medium-sized businesses were things like web applications, everything else in malicious errors, representing 70% of the breaches. So everything else is sort of this big catch-all phrase for things that weren't reported as specific types of breaches, like DDoS attacks and some of the more classic patterns for disrupting companies. The threat actors were 74% external people and 26% internal people. So we're seeing attacks in the SMBs, both from external sources and internal people that do something wrong or that are bad guys within companies. And of course, the motivation is mostly financial. So what we see, which is also concerning from the Verizon Data Breach Report, is that something like 25% of small, medium-sized businesses really have no security plan. And the average cost for an insider-related cyber incident is well over $7 million. So depending on the size of your company, that could be a significant chunk of change to have to pay to fix a cyber incident. More concerning to me, though, is this number on the bottom. 60% of SMBs don't even think they're a target. Many people in the SMBs tell us, well, we're so small, why would the bad guys go after us when they could go after the bigger guys? Well, it turns out that 43% of the attacks in 2019 were on small and medium-sized businesses, precisely because of that. Small businesses are often a target because we have a different sense of security. Either we think we're too small and therefore we don't have to keep ourselves as secure as the big guys, or because we haven't put proper defenses in place. So it's sort of like thinking about you live in a really expensive neighborhood, but you don't have the most expensive house. So why would you lock your doors? If there's a thief in the area, they're going to go after the bigger houses. Well, the truth is they're going to go after the easiest one to get to, not necessarily the biggest one. So in our group at MIT, we like to say there's really only two kinds of companies: those that know they've been attacked and those that don't yet know they've been attacked. You've been attacked and your software has kept the bad guys out, or perhaps there's some malicious code brewing inside your company or inside your supply chain that you don't even know about yet. So we like to say the bad guys have upped their game and we have to do the same thing. We have to figure out how to keep ourselves safe, not only in our offices, but in our homes. Our families and our organizations all have to be kept safe, especially as we are working remotely, and it's never been more urgent or more important. Now, the technology will keep us safe, but the technology can't keep us 100% secure. Statistics vary, but they usually center around a number close to 90%. 90% of breaches tend to start with some sort of human error. Either you click on something you shouldn't have clicked on, or you open a file you shouldn't have opened, or you do something else that may have been unintended, but it lets in a vulnerability which can be exploited by threat actors. So that's how the human error plays out. But what we've seen over the pandemic is a major increase in cybercrime. And so not only are we just as vulnerable as ever, maybe more so because we're working from home, but the bad guys know that. And so they have upped their game. I like to say, I'm sorry the formatting got strange here, but I like to say that COVID-19 created the perfect storm of FUD, fear, uncertainty, doubt, with a little chaos thrown in. There are so many things going on and so many opportunities for misinformation or bad information that it's really hard to separate out what should we be doing from what should we not be doing. What should we click on from what should we not be clicking on? So let me spend just a few minutes sharing some of the scams that I saw during COVID-19. And then I'm going to ask you just take a minute and maybe share a story with us. So if you have seen some of these or have some examples in your own world where you saw some cyber shenanigans or something suspicious, I'm going to ask you in a minute to put that in the chat line. But some of the things that we've noticed, that we've seen, are things like email scams. They've been going on for a long time, but under the guise of the COVID-19 pandemic, we saw a huge increase in email scams. Here's just one example in this picture on this slide. This is purportedly an email from the World Health Organization, and it's got a little blue button in the middle. And if you want to click on that, that will tell you supposedly safety resources. But what it really does is it downloads malware to your system, which can then compromise the systems that you have. And emails like this, we call these phishing emails. These are the kind of emails that are sent, and they are more and more sophisticated. During the pandemic, people were searching for information on how COVID was spreading or what the solutions were or vaccines. And so these kind of emails were incredibly effective. Next, we saw things like images, like this image here, that were weaponized. So in this case, you can tell this is an old picture because it shows that the total number of cases was only 95,000 cases of COVID. And we know, of course, it went way over that. So this was early on in the pandemic. But this picture is a copy of a picture from Johns Hopkins, which happens to be the source that many people were going to find out about the spread of COVID. And it was weaponized. Some code was inserted into the picture. So if you open the picture, you still see the right picture, but it downloads some malware into your system. So the issue here is you don't want to open up files or download pictures just generically from generic sites. You want to make sure, if you, in this case, were looking for information on COVID, that you went to Johns Hopkins site and looked at the information on the source rather than something that somebody might have sent you. We saw an increase in ransomware and blackmail attacks. This is just one email that somebody shared about about a ransomware attack. This is actually what they saw. And this is the email that says your files are now encrypted by a program called NetWalker. And all encrypted files on the computer have an extension that they share here. And it says that don't try to fix this yourself. You've got to send us money or you're going to damage your files or perhaps lose your files. Now, ransomware and blackmail attacks are scary enough. Trying to figure out what to do about them and how you handle them is something that keeps a lot of cybersecurity people up at night. But this particular one was attached to emails under the file name coronavirus COVID-19.vbs. And so it looked like it was a file on coronavirus. And when you clicked on it, you unleashed this ransomware attack. So what do you do if you see a ransomware attack? Well, frankly, if you have a ransomware attack in your organization, what you want to do is call in the authorities. Unless you have a very strong cybersecurity team, and most SMBs don't have that level of security, you want to call in the experts. You can call your local police department. You might even try your local insurance company, because many insurance companies now have arms to help their customers work through some of these events, because of course there's business loss and potential insurance claims. So they've put some effort into trying to help companies manage through their ransomware attacks. But I would say call the authorities here. The next one is just general work from home vulnerabilities on our network. I'm sure many of you, like me, are at home today or in a remote location today. And so we're working on networks that aren't as secure as those in our work environments. So things like sharing your network with perhaps your partner or your spouse or your kids or your neighbors. If their systems download malware, it can jump to your system if you're on the same network. And many people never thought about that. So that opened up another whole set of vulnerabilities for companies. And likewise, we saw many people doing Zoom meetings from home or this kind of meeting, GoToWebinar. And early on, those systems just weren't robust enough to keep out Zoom bombs and malware. Of course, they've been fixed, and many of the systems, including the one we're on today, are much more secure than they were in the beginning. But those kinds of activities keep coming up.
Keri?
And the last one,
You know, we got a question that came in, and it reminded me of something. I'll get to the question in a second. You know, we've had a number of people on our advisory council that have actually installed their agents on the laptops through Nodeware to see how secure their home Wi-Fi is. And it's fascinating that some of them, while living in an urban environment, have actually identified where people are on their Wi-Fi, their other neighbors and the like, that are getting into their systems that they didn't know about it. That gets to, you know, one of the questions we got, which was, you know, what suspicious scams or phishing have you experienced or maybe found from some of your studies? And I know you're going to get to that, but I thought it would be worth just bringing up a couple of comments if you had right now.
yeah, well, I mean, I just talked about some email scams, fake emails, fake weaponized pictures, people getting on other people's networks, as you just talked about, Stuart. Some of the ones that were particularly insidious to me are these next couple of slides. One of them is fake websites, fake pharmacies and remedies. All of us are we're looking for solutions now where some people are looking for vaccines or looking for information about the Delta variant and does our vaccine protect us from that? And so the bad guys know this, and there are a number of new websites popping up every day that try to get you to look at their website. So early on, they were about fake pharmaceutical that might reduce the COVID virus, like this one I'm showing you on this page here, or for face masks, personal protective equipment. Now we're seeing more of those around shots, vaccines, and other kinds of medical or non-medical interventions that will keep you safe given where we are with COVID today. But perhaps the most insidious one to me, one that I think I mentioned to you, Stuart, that I found particularly interesting, was last June, a year ago, where there was a face mask exemption card scam. So we all know that face masks were in many places mandatory. And somebody came up with this idea of creating a exemption card for people who didn't want to wear a face mask. And it was reported at NPR and New York Times. Here's a picture of what that card looks like. So the card, well, this was one of them. Many of them came up. The card basically says, I don't have to wear a face mask and you can't make me. And people paid $50 for these cards. But the truth is you don't need a card. I mean, if you didn't want to wear a face mask and you put up a fight, you didn't have to wear a face mask. In fact, many organizations hadn't thought through what would they do if somebody came in their building and hadn't worn a face mask. But you didn't need an exemption card, and certainly not a fake one to get you out of wearing a face mask. Today, it's many places only require you to wear a mask if you have not been vaccinated. And of course, there's no way to tell whether you're vaccinated or not. And so we're seeing cards pop up that say, I don't have to wear a face mask, I'm vaccinated, and you don't have to have been vaccinated to buy that card. So these exemption cards were another kind of scam that we saw. So let me stop here, Stuart, and see if anybody has a story that they could add to the chat. What have you seen? What's something you saw during the last year or so that you found out was suspicious or fake, or that you suspect might have been suspicious or fake? Anybody have any stories you could share with us?
You know, while people are typing, you know, I certainly have one around. You know, your mother needs money. Please, please wire money to this event or that event. We seem to be getting a number of those, as well as vaccines, right? We're offering the vaccine if you want to come in line, you can pay a certain amount of money and get the vaccine immediately.
Yes, those are two big ones. You know, we all know that the Nigerian prince is not leaving us millions of dollars. I think if that scam hasn't made it to your inbox, or the stories of that scam hasn't made it to your inbox, then you must have a brand new inbox. But there have been many variants on that particular scam, whether it's your, you know, an aunt or someone you used to work with, or a family member that you haven't seen in a while, or other, you know, local people, local famous people that might be trying to reach out to you. And then the flip side of that is like what you described, Stuart, where people say, you know, your son is in jail, or your mother needs money, or your grandfather needs an operation, and we've been told to reach out to you. Could you send money? We've also seen a number of scams in the social dating world, where people build up relationships virtually, and that's even been more insidious during COVID, because people weren't meeting in person, and then sending out a scam like, well, I can't pay my rent this month, can you send me $1,000? And while it seems like people wouldn't fall for those, I know a number of smart people that have absolutely fallen for those kinds of scams, simply because you know, everything's virtual. There's fear, uncertainty, doubt. There's all sorts of confusion. We just can't tell whether somebody's real or not. And of course, many of us are good-hearted and we want to do the right thing. So did we get any stories, Stuart? Did anybody share a story with us?
I'm told there's a couple that have come through the chat, although I don't see them. So give me a second.
I'm only seeing the organizers in the chat. I don't know if somebody else is monitoring this.
Yeah. Hey guys, we have a few in the Q&A. So we have DeAndre Williams, who shared a lot of spam phone calls or asking to renew car insurances. Mike Borges also shared that he's seen fake password resets, emails from Microsoft 365 and Google Workspace templates that look semi-real with logos and all.
Yes.
Mark Sachs also shared that we have credential hijacking for Microsoft Office. So a lot of Microsoft Office 365 scams, fakes. Frederico also shared that there was an SMS-based attempt to lure clicking on a link promising 6 months of free Netflix to those in quarantine. So that's a scary one as well. And we also had Arvind share registering on ftc.gov for scam alerts sends you and alert frequently daily that shows how creative the hackers are. So if you want to see these creative attempts, ftc.gov scam alerts sends you these alerts frequently.
Perfect. Thank you, Megan. Yes, I actually used to have a slide in here from FTC. That's the Federal Trade Commission for those of you in the United States. So ftc.gov has a whole scam alert page, and you can go there and see what the latest ones are. Many, in fact, some of the slides I pulled earlier on were from that page. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for those examples, people. I can't see it in the chat. I'm not sure why it's set up this way this time, but
we've
thank
got
you for
a
sharing
few
that.
more. Yeah, Carrie, it's actually in the Q&A. So if you open the Q&A
it's not in my
box,
Q&A either. All I can see are organizers. I can't see anybody else.
Let me give you just a couple more really quickly. So Ginger also shared, well, she shared a question here. What's the best way to keep security guidelines top of mind for the workplace? So that can be a little
glad she asked, because that's where we're going next. That's the next part of my talk. So perfect.
Wonderful. Then let me share these two other examples, and then we'll move on to how do we keep these security guidelines top of mind. And she's especially interested in how to keep less technical colleagues interested.
That's exactly what we're going to talk about.
Perfect. And she also says they have a tool that keeps bad links and attachments out of email boxes, but not everyone knows they need to lock their own computers when they step away. So that's the end of that one. And then Andy Haas shared a user in AP was prompted to log into a Microsoft looking site. It stole her credentials, logged her in via webmail, and then used the email account to send an invoice to AP requesting payments to a charity in China. So that's another, I guess, accounts
Good. Well,
payable.
thank you for sharing that. Let me just go ahead and move on because I want to get to answering the question about how do you build a culture of cybersecurity. I'm sure there's other stories, and let's just continue to collect them, and maybe we can share them at the end if there's time left.
Perfect.
I want to jump to this question about how do you get everybody to do the right thing. Let me just first comment about the story about sending a note to AP or to getting an invoice paid in China. That's called spear phishing. People figure out enough information about you or your organization to make it sound credible, to make their ask sound credible. And that's one reason why the technology is not enough to keep bad guys out. It's nice that you have technology that will keep out the some of the attachments, but even those sometimes can skirt around the technology if the bad guys know how to do that. So let me jump into talking about this issue about how we create a culture of cybersecurity. So since human error is the biggest issue, and the question raised about how do we get people, particularly non-technical people, to do the right thing, that's exactly the issue. We want everybody in the organization to feel they know what to do and they are empowered. And in most organizations, we think we do that through training. We put people through a training program. But you and I both know that a training program is only effective for about 10 minutes, unless somehow we've convinced somebody in that training program that this is super important for them. So what we found out in our research is the key to changing behavior is really to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs, because it's the values, attitudes, and beliefs that drive cybersecurity behaviors. So we define a culture of cybersecurity as the values, attitudes, and beliefs that drive cybersecure behaviors in an organization. Let me explain what we mean. So this model here that I'm showing, you'll see on the right-hand side, we want to drive cybersecure behaviors. Those behaviors happen because people believe it's important to do it, because they believe that they're helping their organization, because they value making sure that things are secure, because they have an attitude that is built because of the organization that they're in or the environment that they're in, that it's important. For example, all of us want to keep our families safe and secure. We'll do what it takes to keep our families safe and secure. So if I just tell you to change your passwords, you're going to say, oh yeah, okay, fine, I'll get around to it. But if I tell you that you're going to lose $1 million or you're going to lose your bank account access tomorrow if you don't change your password, I've changed your attitude. You're going to go do it because you don't want to lose your bank account access. So the values, attitudes, and beliefs are the key component here. Now, what changes values, attitudes, and beliefs? External influences, like what industry are you in? What company are you in? What country? Countries have different attitudes. So in some place, for example, if you're in financial services, then you're probably a little bit more aware. You already have an attitude of data protection and security because nobody's going to do business with a bank that isn't secure. And so it's already kind of built in to your environment. Same with like healthcare. People are worried about their health records getting out or about people dying if information gets out. And so healthcare tends to be an industry where they have high values, attitudes, and beliefs around cybersecurity. You don't see that in every industry, and you particularly don't see that in SMBs, where we are more focused on a particular part of our industry rather than these larger companies that have many different areas that they play in. But what's most interesting to me is the managerial mechanism. Those are things you can do today or tomorrow to make your organization more secure. And I want to spend a few minutes on that. So let me jump into this. The behaviors we're trying to drive are behaviors that you do because it's part of your job, and behaviors that you do just because you're part of the team or part of the organization. Let me give you an example. So here's an email that I got recently. This is from Nationwide, and it's basically selling me a service, ironically, for protection, personal identity theft protection. I got this email and I looked at it. Now, of course, I have a lot of time in the cyber world, so I'm more suspicious than the average person. But I looked at this and I said, wow, is this scam? Is this a scam of some sort? So I look at the email and I see this weird email, and it does have Nationwide in the email, but it doesn't say nationwide.com. It has some other stuff in it. And I think, well, that could be scammy. Maybe there's something going on there. I read the email and there's nothing in here that gives me any confidence that this is really from Nationwide. And then I see this button that says activate now. And then the only other thing I can do is call this 800 number and see if it's real or not. And we all know you don't want to call the number in the email, because if the bad guy is a good one, he's going to put, or she's going to put, her own phone number in there that's going to answer your questions and make you feel like it's very real. So I called Nationwide and I said, is this real? And the guy laughed at me and he said, I can't believe you're calling me. Only a few people have called me, and yes, this is actually real. And we in our department have been trying to tell our security people, our marketing people, that this email looks like spam and nobody's gonna click on it. So it turns out that my interpretation of this, first of all, it gives me a great story to tell you guys here in my talk, because this actually is not a scam. This is not a spam email, it's real. And second of all, in my personal opinion, the only people that they should that click on this button are the people they should not insure, because those are the people that are more likely to click on a button and download malware and cause a problem on their computer, because this email does not look like it's a real email. So that's the kind of behavior we want to drive. We want people to question an email. Is this really something that they should click on? We want them to ask your security people, ask your manager, ask your insurance company or whoever's sending you the email. We don't want them to just blindly click on something. So that's an example of a behavior that we want to drive. So let's talk about some managerial mechanisms that will drive the values, attitudes, and beliefs that drive behaviors of cybersecurity. First of all, I have training under here, and that's something we all know about. Training is super important because it sets a baseline. What are the basic things we want to make sure people know? But it's not enough. As I said, training only lasts as long as you're reinforcing it, or if you've really changed my attitude. People do training to change your behavior, but what they forget is what they have to do is change the motivation for your behavior. And so training's important. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying don't expect that to be enough. Other managerial mechanisms that are more effective are, for example, communication programs. Now, awareness is important. Making sure people are aware of things is important. But more important is continuous communications about keeping secure. Let me give you an example. One company we work with, a financial services, an insurance company actually, they have somebody that is what they call the culture leader. So that's another box over here. She owns building a culture of cybersecurity. That's her job, build a culture of cybersecurity. She's not the chief information security officer. That person is also in charge of culture, but the CISO has everything and owns everything with security. So that person doesn't have enough bandwidth to devote to just building a culture of cybersecurity. So my culture leader, she happens to be a marketing person. And so she knows all about marketing campaigns. And so she has used her knowledge of marketing campaigns to build communication plans, to build marketing campaigns around cybersecurity. For example, they have little video clips that they have pulled off the web that remind people in a humorous way about the importance of being secure. In their world, they changed the name. It's not let's be cyber secure, it's let's protect our data. It may sound like a silly little change, but everybody would say, yes, we want to be cyber secure, but very few people really know what that means. And this kind of gets back to the question that was raised. How do we get non-technical people to do the right thing? Well, if I say be cyber secure, everybody's going to say, oh, yeah, but they're not necessarily going to know what that means. But if I say we want to protect our data, we're putting on a campaign to protect our data, all of a sudden that makes sense. People know what their data is, and it makes sense that they might want to connect, might want to protect it. They feel pride in making sure that their data is protected. They have the attitude and the values to protect data, and that drives data protection behaviors. Another example is getting executives involved. In another company, we've looked at the chief executive officer, the CEO, the head of the company. It's a small company actually, but the head of the company has an all hands meeting on a regular basis. And he starts his all hands meeting with a 5-minute cybersecurity moment. he tells a story or he has somebody else tell a story about how to keep the company secure. Now, this does a couple things. First of all, it imparts some knowledge. He's giving a little tidbit every time they have an all hands meeting. But the fact that the CEO has brought this to the attention of the people in the organization tells the people in the organization that this is important. The CEO thinks this is important, and therefore I should have the attitude that it's important also. So it's not necessarily what the president says, but that the president says anything. Words are super powerful. So the more that your non-technical managers can raise the issue and tell stories, even if it's personal stories. Another organization that we looked at, every time there's an email, it's a small and medium-sized business, every time there's an email that looks fishy, they send it to everyone in the team. The team is about 15 people, and everybody in the team looks at it and says, oh, yeah, I do think that's suspicious, or no, I clicked on that one and here's what I found out. So they're sharing their emails with the team. These are not technical people. These are general management people, but the fact that they talk about it raises the awareness and drives the attitude that this organization needs to be secure, and I personally have a role in that. So that's what I want to leave you with about driving behaviors, is that you want to change the values, attitudes, and beliefs. Okay, so let me go on here. My model explodes into a lot of other buckets. Of course, we don't have time to cover them all today, but in this slide, I've given you the link. If you want to download a paper and take a look at this model, then please feel free to go to that link here, the Scholar Space link. And if you just want more information about this project or any of our other projects, you can just go to our CAMS website, and I've given you that link here also.
Hey,
okay.
Keri?
Uh-huh.
We'll make a point about that. We'll also include that link on the LinkedIn events page. So for all of you that are part of that group, we'll have that link there. We'll also make it available to all the people when we send a follow-on note.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So let me just wrap this up, and then we'll open up for more questions. So this is the model that the picture I want you to leave with in your head. Cybersecure behaviors are driven by values, attitudes, and beliefs, which is our culture. And values, attitudes, and beliefs are driven by some external influences that we as managers have very little control over, and managerial mechanisms that we have a lot of control over. Okay, so what can you do? Some things to look out for. Well, at the beginning, someone asked me a question, what are the scams and threats that we're seeing? So this slide really addresses that. Look out for emails or calls or texts about government stimulus, about COVID-19, or anything that asks for personal information or your money. Obviously, that should be suspect. And before you give out anything like that, you should make sure that you know exactly who is asking. And if it's on a phone call or a text, make sure that you know that you're really talking to the person who they say they are. Some of the ways that I do that is I ask them for their phone number and I call back, or I ask them for the name of their company and then I go look online and call that number directly. I never give out my information over those three ways. Online ads. Look out for online ads that are about things that you might want to buy. And make sure you know the source. So again, don't just click on an ad. Those ads are all over the place. The bad guys can buy Google ads and Facebook ads as easily as we can buy them for legitimate purposes. They can buy them for illegitimate purposes. So make sure that if you see an ad for something that looks fun or interesting, go to the website directly and see if you can find that product. Don't click on an ad, no matter how good the offer is. Demands for payments. We've seen some scams around utility company bills, phone company bills, credit card bills. The bad guys know that these are high priority bills that you pay, and so they send fake ones to get you to pay bills, or they tell you that your internet bill is overdue or your utilities are going to be turned off. All of those kinds of requests must be verified before you send money. How do you do that? Call the company directly. Don't call the number that they give you in the scam. Go get through a different source, either through the website itself or through your previous bills that you have that have a phone number. Just be sure you know who you're sending payment to. And emails or calls from coworkers or company officials that you did not expect. We're hearing more and more stories of spear phishing activity where the person got a call or an email or maybe a text from somebody in their company asking them to do something that was out of the ordinary. It might have been go get Walmart gift cards because I'm in a meeting and I want to give them out as a thank you gift. Or it might be transfer money to this account, or like the person earlier who said something about money being transferred to a Chinese charity. Something out of the ordinary should easily be a flag for you to verify who it is. And that means call the person directly, even if you don't know them well, or call their administrative assistant if it's a senior person or they have one, but verify before you follow the rules. Okay, so I've given you a number of things to do. Let me give you some calls to action here. Make sure that you update your laptops and your cell phones. All your apps are up to date. Those pesky patches that change something like the user interface usually are there to update and fix vulnerabilities. So the more out of date your software is, the more vulnerable your systems are. So you want to make sure you install those patches. Don't click on any websites or emails. If you do, contact your support person, whether that's an internal IT or your contracted software person. Contact somebody and ask them what to do about something that you've clicked on. They'll know. They'll have some suggestions. Know if you've been compromised. You can go to this website, haveibeenpawned.com, and this website will tell you, you can put in your email address and it will tell you all of the places where your credentials were compromised using that email address. So you can go check on yourself right now and find out how far and how wide your credentials have traveled. I should tell you, you can expect that your information is out there. It's practically impossible to protect your information from being stolen, but it is possible to protect yourself from damages. And that's my next thing. You want to protect yourself. You want to create a risk management model for yourself personally and for your company. For example, if you assume that your emails are out there, your email addresses and your passwords are out there, then you'll want to change your passwords. If you assume that your email addresses are out there, that your social security number is out there, you might buy theft protection insurance so that if there's damages, you've protected yourself against a big financial hit. So you want to protect yourself. So change your thinking from one of how do I keep my information from getting out there to one of how do I protect myself from damages. And it's usually about risk mitigation, about risk acceptance, or about transferring risk, transferring it to an insurance product. Models. You want to model the values, attitudes, and beliefs you want from those around you. The story I told you about the executive who brings in stories every meeting is the kind of thing you can do. You're modeling the behavior that you want. And you want to make heroes of the people around you who do the right thing, who have the right behaviors. Because the more you make heroes out of the people doing the right thing, the more other people want to do the right thing. They want to do the right behaviors. Share ideas. I told you the story about the CEO sharing ideas. Another win from that is that it brings these stories from the darkness into the light. And honestly, the bad guys thrive on the fear, uncertainty, and doubt and chaos that we've created in our world around us. And so one way to shine a light on things is to bring them to the light, bring them to the meetings, ask people about it, make it okay to talk about cybersecurity, make it even funny in your organization, have a contest, who's gotten the weirdest email, do what I just did in this thing, ask people for their personal stories and get those things out in the light, because that will help your organization be more secure. Be aware you can check the latest information on social engineering at this CERTA site. CISA is the government agency, the cybersecurity agency of the White House. And somebody else earlier mentioned the Federal Trade Commission. You can see scams on the Federal Trade Commission. The more you can educate yourself, the more likely you are to notice things. Okay, let me just give you my quick commercial about who we are. Our group is Cybersecurity at MIT Sloan, CAMS. Here's our website again. This is our research diagram. We look at strategic, governance, managerial, and organizational issues in cybersecurity. We are funded by companies like yours who join our consortium. So if this topic and other topics around keeping your organization as secure is of interest to you, you might be interested in being a member of our consortium. So you can reach out to me directly. You can go for more information on our website. But we would very much appreciate hearing from you if you think joining our consortium would be of interest to you. That's all I got. Stuart, back to you.
So, Keri, thank you so much. We do have a couple of questions that have come in that I will get to in just a second. I want to remind everybody, if you have a question you want to ask, put it in the question tab, and we will do our best to get to all of them today. Otherwise, we will follow up with you. We do have 3 poll questions that we're going to put up one after the other while we're going through the Q&A as well. So if you could take a second and answer the poll questions, we would appreciate that. And so while we put the first poll question up, Keri, we got a question specifically around, the methods used by SolarWinds and Kyocera in which hackers, corrupted their software update downloads. Would you recommend, or has your study shown where people ought to be, if you will, moving off of their own desktops to an MSP, to an MSSP, or to go to a full-blown, Azure or AWS platform?
So that's a much more technical question than I'm probably qualified to answer, but I'll give you my personal opinion. I don't think clouds are any more secure than your on-prem situations. If you move to the cloud thinking that your security is taken care of in the cloud, then you're opening yourself up for a number of other vulnerabilities. For example, all of those clouds that were just mentioned, AWS and Azure and all the other clouds, they all have their own security protocols that you have to implement as a user of the cloud. So they keep some of the basic platforms secure, but they don't keep your data secure necessarily. They don't keep your applications secure. You have to do all of that. And so the more clouds that you're in, the more as a services that you use, the more security you have to do. Let me give you a personal example. You're probably on Facebook, you're probably on LinkedIn, and you're probably on Twitter. And you have to go to each one of those and set up your security parameters. What will you share? What will you not share? Now, ratchet that up to your cloud and all the applications in the cloud. That's what you have to do if you go to the cloud. So move to the cloud. It does help you if you don't have an IT organization, but move to the cloud judiciously and be careful, because the security issues in the cloud are different. They're not necessarily better or worse, but they're different from what you have on-prem. Now, back to the question about SolarWinds. I think we could easily say that SolarWinds was a game changer in the way that we think about managing the software that we download. And I don't have an answer for that. We're actually looking into that right now. What is the right paradigm? What is the right way to think about systems that you're using in your supply chain and that you're downloading and that you're using, and the updates that you're using? That is kind of a question right now. So let me just say that we have to be careful. You want to stay abreast of what the changes are, that are what the vulnerabilities are, and you want to make sure that you have managed against any damages that might happen from it. So I know that's not the answer we want to hear. What you want to hear is, here's how you make sure SolarWinds doesn't happen again. But we don't have an answer to that, because really the bad guys are looking for every little crack in the system, anything they can exploit. And there are a lot of them, and there's a big payout for them if they do it right. They make a lot of money, and that's their motivation usually, is to make money. So if their motivation is to make money, they're going to look for every opportunity they can do it. And that's moving much faster than, unfortunately, the good guys are moving to keep us more secure.
To that point, Alan Alford from TrustMap is going to be hosting a webinar with us, with one of the folks from Duo at Cisco, coming up in a couple of weeks, specifically talking about how identifying what exploitable devices and multi-factor authentication are 2 simple and easy things that an organization can do to start to be better prepared around the integrity of their data and improving the business continuity of their systems. Once again, Keri, a couple of suggestions you might have for an executive at a small business on things they might want to do.
Yeah, so I think my last couple of slides gave 6 or 7 examples of things you'd want to do. So one thing would be to start talking about cybersecurity so that you raise awareness. The technical people are already pretty aware that cybersecurity is an issue, but those aren't the target of the bad guys. The bad guys are targeting all the people that are less aware. And so the more you can bring it to the surface and have people share their stories and share what they're seeing that looks like a vulnerability, the more likely you are to catch something in an early stage, whether it's an email that's fake or a file that's fake, or helping your organization know what to do. So I would say make sure that you put all your patches in place, make sure that you help everyone in the organization understand that they too might be a target. And so not to scare them, but if they see something, say something, not to just ignore things, and help everybody, give everybody the challenge to help the whole organization be more secure. Honestly, I think a lot of cybersecurity could be free. If we all just talked about it a little more and we all just raised awareness a little more, that doesn't cost us anything. And that could easily reduce the 90% of the vulnerabilities that are human error based, because people would think before they clicked on things, and they would know what to do if they did click on something.
Perfect. Great answer. We really appreciate that. Part of the role of these educational series is to provide an opportunity for these executives that maybe don't have a full-time IT person, or they have desktop support through a separate organization or through an MSP or MSSP. I was just wondering, do you have anything from your study that shows what are some things you ought to be looking for from a partner like an MSP or an MSSP, or at the same time, do you have things that you think about as you transition to the cloud, other than to your point about your security profiles that you have to put away anyway?
So I don't have a checklist for you. That's not an area that I've spent much time in. But I think
Okay.
as you choose partners in this area, you want to make sure that they not only can provide the IT services that you need, but that they have security services. And now that I've told you some of the vulnerabilities, you want to check with them and see what are their plans? How do they help you make sure your data and your information is secure? But more importantly, what plans do they have in place should something happen? What is their mitigation strategy? How can they help you if the information gets out there? Because I think you can assume your information's out there, and now the question is, how do you make sure there's no damages? So I think that's a super important thing to think about. The other piece is how can they help you build a cybersecurity strategy? So there is a framework that's very popular called the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, NIST, N-I-S-T, CSF, Cybersecurity Framework. It's a government recommended framework. But what I like about that framework, it has 5 buckets. The buckets are identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. And those 5 buckets form a high-level strategy for thinking about cybersecurity. We teach this in our executive program for non-cybersecurity executives. We teach executives, how do you think about cybersecurity when you're not the cybersecurity expert? How do you make sure your organizations are secure? What are the questions you should ask? And we teach this model, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework model, because that 5 levels of the 5 buckets, the 5 levels in that framework tell you the main areas you need to make sure are covered. And so I would take that NIST model and I would go to my MSP and I would say, let's talk about our cybersecurity strategy. How do you do all these things? And how do you help me do all of these things? How do you help me protect? How do you help me detect? How do you help me recover? Should I have a cybersecurity incident? And if they don't have a good answer for you, then you might want to look somewhere else, because keeping your stuff secure is obviously super important.
To that point, the first session we had in this educational series was with Chuck Brooks and with Ron Ross, Ron from the NIST framework, talking specifically about how do you get started and how do you get to stage 1 of data gathering. So anybody who's interested can certainly go to our YouTube channel and be able to look at that first one in this series with Ron Ross and with Chuck Brooks. You can download that, you can view it, you can see some of the things they suggested on ways you ought to get started. Keri, maybe it would be worthwhile for a second talking about the CAM series and some of the things that you guys are doing online to help organizations be smarter and safer.
Sure, happy to. So I've mentioned this one paper, which I see has been added to the handout list here. So You can click on that link if you want and download the paper we talked about. But we have many papers on many different topics. I think I shared our research agenda, and all of those areas have multiple different research programs going on, and all of that is available online. We are a university, we're MIT, and so our goal is to publish papers. We're not trying to make money on new products and services based on these papers. We're about coming up with theories and actionable insights that managers can use to make their organizations more secure. So to that end, our website, cams.mit.edu, has a number of other resources that you can use, you can go to. There are a number of research briefs. If you don't want to read a 20-page research paper, you can read a 1-page research brief that tells you the main takeaway from the paper. Or you can watch some of the videos that we've produced, or you can read about articles we've written for Harvard Business Review or Sloan Management Review. Possibly you could find our Wall Street Journal, New York Times, or other publicly available articles that have quoted us. We also have, as I said, for a members only part of our group, we have early research papers and special webinars and in-person events when we can all meet in person again for the companies that join us that are part of our consortium. And then finally, we have what we call our Friday research team meetings. Pretty much every Friday, we talk about some topic in cybersecurity, and it was our team meetings where we educate ourselves, but we've opened it up to our larger community. And now that you've heard me talk, you too can be part of our larger community. So if you go to the CAMS website or email me directly and let me know you're interested, we will put you on the email list for that. I should say that we have a project going on right now that we're looking for some small and medium-sized businesses to help us with, and it's looking at the issue of compliance. We know that when you're compliant, you're not necessarily secure. And when you're secure, you're not necessarily compliant. So we have a research team that would like to talk with small and medium-sized businesses about this issue and how you think about this, or do you think about this. So if that research project is of interest, please email me and let me know you heard me here, and I will connect you with that research team because they would like to talk to you. So there's a couple of resources and an ask.
Perfect, Keri. Thanks so much. You know, I'm interested. We'll put the results of the 3 poll questions on our LinkedIn page in the events section, so you can all take a look at that and also look at the schedule of upcoming sessions. One of the things that I find most interesting is 78% of you said you have continuous scanning, and that is great. We ask this question on every webinar that we do, and that is great to hear because we have found in the past that when somebody says they do continuous scanning, it's actually on the weekends or it's at night, maybe it's monthly. But if you have the ability to do it during normal business hours when people are adding and subtracting devices to their network, that is critically important. You know, we recently had one of our customers have a couple of servers get installed during the middle of the day, and they were immediately alerted to an exploitable device, and they were immediately able to fix it. And with all of the ransomware attacks going on right now, you know, that is critically important for people to be able to do. So it is great to see, you know, that 73% of the people were able to do continuous scanning and are scanning during normal business hours every single day. So that is great to see. We are approaching the top of the hour. You know, Keri, I just want to thank you for your time and all your insights. We got to all of the questions that were submitted today. But if you have other questions, please submit them on our LinkedIn page during the event. Get back to you. The slides, as well as the handouts, as well as the a recording of this will be on our YouTube channel, so people will get to that as well. So that is there. And as I said, we have a series of sessions coming up over the next couple of months, and we look forward to having you on our sessions. With that, I just want to thank everybody for their time. Keri, I'll let you say thank you and any closing remarks, and then we will close this down on time.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk to this group. Really, our goal is to make sure every organization knows how to keep themselves more secure and to provide actionable insights to help organizations do that. So if anybody's interested, reach out. In the meantime, thank you for your time today and your stories and your insights, and I really enjoyed this. Thanks.
Everybody have a great day, and we will see you on one of our sessions going forward. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.